Okay. Hopefully this recording works out. And I'm going to try to keep this to about 15 minutes. Okay. So I'll be reciting the photograph by Thomas Hardy. The flame crept up the portrait line by line, as it lay on the coals in the silence of nights profound, and over the arms incline, and along the marge of the silkwork superfine, and gnawed at the delicate bosom's defenseless round. Then I vented a cry of hurt, and averted my eyes. The spectacle was one that I could not bear, to my deep and sad surprise. But, compelled to heed, I again looked furtive-wise, till the flame had eaten her breasts and mouth and hair. Thank God she's out of it now, I said at last, in a great relief of heart, when the thing was done that had turned my soul aghast. And nothing was left of the picture, unsheathed from the past, but the ashen ghost of the card it had figured on. She was a woman long hid amid packs of years. She might have been living or dead. She was lost to my sight. And the deed that had nigh drawn tears was done in a casual clearing of life's arrears. But I felt as if I had put her to death that night. Well, she knew nothing thereof, did she survive, and suffered nothing, if numbered among the dead. Yet, if on earth alive, did she feel a smart, and with vague, strange anguish strive? If in heaven, did she smile at me sadly, and shake her head? Okay, for my analysis portions, in the first line, I was really struck by the verb of crept, because that portrays like a very animal-like and predatory image, as if like something is trying to sneak up on another thing, and so then that automatically makes the flame a bit of a villain, like trying to harm the portrait, and the portrait would be the victim in that situation. But then in addition, the repetition of line by line, the repetition of the word, but then also the I vowel sound. The I vowel sound particularly comes up a lot in this stanza and creates a lot of repetition in a more relaxing sense throughout the stanza, even though the flame is destroying the photograph. But the repetition of line by line kind of helps to like portray the flame as it is like streaming upward and destroying the photograph. In addition, this is also in a jammed line, which would also simulate the flame like continuously like consuming more and more of the photograph. In the next line, as it lay on the coals in the silence of nights profound, you also have the assonance with the repetition of the I vowel again between silence and nights, which again kind of helps to create like that still feeling that's conveyed by silence of nights profound, by keeping it consistent. And then the next three lines are a polysyndeton. They're all introduced by the conjunction and over the arms incline. By choosing this conjunction, it emphasizes the plurality and the sequence of what the flame is doing by consuming the arm. And the arm is also the first like body part or body image that we really get, which is interesting. And so now it's able to take on a more human character. Next line, and along the marge of the silkwork superfine, you have the repetition of the S sounds, which kind of would imitate the hissing sound of a flame as it's consuming something, which I found rather interesting. And the last line, and gnawed at the delicate bosom's defenseless round. Here you have the reappearance of predatory imagery with the verb of gnawed, but then in addition you have the harsher or harder D sounds surrounding the soft B consonant, which I found interesting and reflective of the fact that the flame is kind of surrounding what is delicate and what is fragile and consuming it. In the next stanza, there's kind of a break in the repetition or the relaxing sound that's created by like soft consonants and the I vowel and whatnot in the first stanza, with then I vented a cry of hurt and averted my eyes. It opens with a harsh th sound, but then in addition, the V consonant is repeated twice, invented and averted. The line is also punctuated in the middle with a comma, as well as, and it's also end stopped with a semicolon. So it's a very slow moving line, at least in comparison to the stanza above, which either had jammed lines or no punctuation in lines. But then in addition, this is also the first time where the speaker refers to himself with I and my eyes. So he's beginning to interpose himself in the situation, and so now we have to ask, what is his role? Next line, the spectacle is one that I could not bear. So here is the first introduction that we get to his feelings toward this. We caught a glimpse when he's describing the flame as predatory, because then we can kind of assume that he thinks it's bad. However, he notes that the spectacle is one that I could not bear. But this also introduces a sense of irony, simply because if it's one that he could not bear, why could he not put out the flame and save the photograph? So there's a tension between what he wants to and what he says. That's kind of interesting to explore. But then this would also make him some part of a emotional victim of this, because he seems to be harmed by watching the photograph burn, similar to the portrait itself being a victim of the flame. Then, to my deep and sad surprise, you also have another instance of repetition of the S sounds, which would add to the hissing of a flame when it was burning. But compelled to heed, I again look furtively. Here, there's an interrupter that's set off by commas, which again would slow down the line in a similar way as someone would slow down or change their action when they are compelled to heed. So in a way, the line is acting out what it is trying to portray. And then you have, till the flame had eaten her breasts and mouth and hair. You have more animalistic imagery or verbiage in terms of eating, because eating gives the flame a more conscious action than just the flame doing what a flame does. But then in addition, he notes there's another polysyndeton with breaths and mouth and hair, which helps to emphasize the plurality of what it's consuming. But then in addition, he also points out body parts that would particularly set her off as feminine, which is really interesting, and which also connects with the delicate bosom's defenseless round and the silkwork superfine, because all these things are kind of emphasizing her femininity, if not her delicate nature or the fragile nature of a photograph and memory in general. Then next stanza. Thank God she's out of it now. I said it last. Here we have an interjection. But then in addition, when he exclaims this, he gives the flame this freeing aspect to it, and the it pronoun is not necessarily defined, nor do we really know what she is coming out of, per se. So that introduces an interesting tension. Is the woman being freed from the photograph through the burning of the flame? And in that way, does the flame have a purifying or freeing aspect in itself, or is she out of his memory or out of his past through this burning process? Or, because this is a bit ambiguous, until the next line at least, he could have pulled the photograph out of the flame and been relieved at his action, and so he could have saved her being the photograph. However, in the next line, in a great relief of heart when the thing was done that had set my soul aghast, that kind of clarifies it, because we know that the burning of the photograph was what was causing such an emotional response, and he notes that it was done now. So it would make sense to assume that the flame had completely destroyed the photograph. However, in the line, when the great relief of the thing, when in a great relief of heart when the thing was done that had set my soul aghast, he has a tendency to not be able to to like name his action of burning the photograph, which is really interesting because it seems to be something that was so terrible that he can't talk about or directly address, that had set my soul aghast. And so here you have more repetition of the S sound, and it kind of draws your attention. In addition, this is an enjambed line, and the comma comes after the shorter line in the stanza, and so it really brings you there, at least, which would emulate the idea that now the deed that was upsetting him was done, because it gives the line a natural endpoint with the comma. In addition, he goes on to say, and nothing was left of the picture unsheathed from the past. It's interesting that he uses the term unsheathed, because typically that's only used with images of weaponry or other weapons. So this kind of gives the idea that the past and or the picture has the ability to harm him, or has like some emotional power over him, which is really interesting considering that he burns the picture. And then in addition, but the action goes to the card it had figured on. By ascribing like the term ghost to something like a picture, he's giving it more of a human quality, which he did describe the picture in terms of a lot of very feminine and a lot of very human ways. So it makes sense. But then in addition, by ascribing it the power of a ghost, he's giving it, or the subject of the portrait, lasting power in his life, to kind of stick around, as that's commonly understood what ghosts do. Yes, but I'm running out of time. Fourth stanza. She was a woman long hid amid packs of years. A couple interesting things about this. First, there's the repetition of the W sound that kind of helps you kind of glide into the stanza. But then in addition, the fact that he uses the past tense verb was instead of what would be the present tense is. She was a woman long hid amid. She is a woman long hid amid packs of years, because technically she is. We learn that she could either be living or dead, but he doesn't know. So either way, present tense could be appropriate in this instance. However, he uses past tense, which makes me believe that he just assumes that she's passed or that she's no longer around. But either way, he also knows that she was long hid amid packs of years, which is just an interesting image to think of, a woman being hid within a pack, within like so many years that she can't be seen. But in addition, there's also this idea of like, because of all the animalistic imagery we have, there's also like a packs of animals that he could be comparing the years to. Then in the next line, she might have been living or dead, she was lost to my sight. It's interesting because the initial pronoun she and his reference to my sight are as far away as they can get in the line. However, the semicolon with the repetition of that pronoun breaks that up and obviously locates the two things closer together, which is interesting. It begs the question, like, does she really need to be lost to his sight? Could he make contact with her in theory if she's still alive? And the deed that had nigh drawn tears. Referring to burning of the picture as the deed, kind of, it again is a repetition of that idea where it was so painful that he can't name it. Then in addition, he defines it as the deed that had nigh drawn tears. So now the deed is the actor, and the action that is performing is drawing tears, which takes him out of the equation and gives the deed itself all the agency to make him a victim. So it's kind of like swapping out those those roles within it. But then he notes, was done in a casual clearance of life's arrears, which is really interesting because you have the repetition of the harsh consonant C, but then there's also this tension between it evoked such an emotional response, but now he's saying that this is a casual thing. So essentially it invokes a sense that this is done a lot, or at least by a lot of people, and it's a common thing to get rid of old photographs. However, the last line of that stanza sets it off with, first of all, it sets it off with the but conjunction, which indicates that something goes against like an expectation, but I felt as if I'd put her to death that night. Here we have the repetition of the I pronoun again, which juxtaposes the passivity that he assigned himself in the note and the deed that had nigh drawn tears, because it makes him, he brings him to the forefront as an actor in this situation, as someone that had put her to death. And then in addition, this also just this also reinforces the tension around this being a casual thing, and his own overly emotional response to this. And then there's an ellipsis at the end, which allows for a pause, and then the next stanza opens with an M dash. But I will not go into that because those are my 20 lines, and I'm already at 16 minutes. Okay, thank you.